Um, our first speaker is a systemic designer and specialist in circular economy, a lecturer at Politecnico di Milano and Domus Academy, worked for the EU project Food Trails for the last 40 years, more or less, and is a co-founder of Forest Valley. So please welcome on board Alice Casiraghi.
Hello, thank you very much, and thank you for being so many, although I'm not going to talk about the intricacies of AI. I'm going to talk a bit more systemically about the impact of AI. So my presentation is about rivers and AI, water and AI. This is why it's called Tigris and Euphrates and AI. I already got introduced, so no need to introduce myself more. Just so you know, I come from the design world. I also worked in UX. I worked in UX in Shanghai, in Hong Kong. I worked with the first chatbots with Watson, with IBM at the beginning in 2017. And I joined the digital transformation team of the Italian government when I came back to Italy in 2019. But then I really wanted to switch to the circular economy because I thought as designers, it's very important we have like an overview of like how we can design things to be sustainable. And so it was important for me to switch in this field. And I'm trying to bridge also the digital world and the evolution of the digital world with sustainability now. We need circular economy. Circular economy is about recirculating resources, not dispersing resources, not creating waste. Because in a climate crisis, yes, we need renewable energy, we need more sustainable energies, but that's going to cover only like 55% of the all emissions. And then the other 45%, it's avoided through a circular economy. So being mindful of resources, water included, and try to recirculate them as much as possible. Okay. You probably remember this when Mark Zuckerberg used to say, move fast and break things. And that was like the cool thing to say maybe 10, 15 years ago. But let's say breaking things is not something that we can afford as much anymore. And it would make Antonio Guterres very upset and also the Earth very upset. Antonio Guterres is the UN Secretary General, and for the first time in 2020, after COVID came, for the first time he was very blunt about it. He went to the Columbia University, that was very outspoken about, in general, like rights and climate change. And he went with this sentence. He said, to put it simply, the state of the planet is broken. Humanity is waging war on nature. And this is suicidal. And making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. And it must be the top priority for everyone, everywhere. This is why I'm here talking to you today, because all of us can have an impact in this. Like, even if I'm a developer, even if I'm a designer, like, everybody can think about the systemic impact of what we do in our work. Or, as some Italian singer used to say, even if you think you're absolved, you're still involved, meaning that whatever you do, it will have a climate impact. And the point is not that you should feel ashamed of it or you should feel guilty about it. This is a very Western mindset. We should be aware of it. We should be aware of it because it helps us prepare. It helps us be, ready to react to whatever can happen because of climate impacts. And so we want to be aware. We want to expand this knowledge, and this is why this presentation today. I don't know if you know what is this. It made the headlines recently. These are the huge data centers that X has just built in Memphis to power their AI. So these data centers are ginormous, and they are located in a very already depleted industrial area. They're called Colossal, I think. Basically, this XAI supercomputer, its primary use today is to fuel Grok, the chatbot running the social post on X, on the social network X. And it made the headlines because basically they had the permission to use only 15 methane burners to power this data center. Turns out they're using more than 35. And even when it turned out they're using more than 35 because they used like thermal imagery, they said, no, actually we have more than 35, but we're not using all of them. But turns out, like, if you see the image, that's probably more than 15 light up at that time. So we know the relationship with between Musk and climate and like the administration nowadays of the United States. So let's say he's trying to break things. He's trying to move fast and break things. He's trying to beat the competition. And so if he doesn't have renewable electricity, he will use methane. But methane is not what I'm interested in today. Like, I'm interested in the waters and the rivers. And so I try to zoom out and see where is this super data center, supercomputer located. It's located there, like between the Memphis city in Tennessee and the river, the Mississippi River, that borders, it creates the border between Arkansas and Tennessee in the US. And if you zoom out even more, this is the watershed of the Mississippi River. Like, it's huge. It's one of the biggest rivers and the biggest in North America. No, I think there's a bigger one in Canada. But anyway, in North America, it's, let's say, the river with the most affluence of all. And that's, like, rivers is where, you know, we developed all our human activities. We developed trade. We developed industries and agriculture and everything. So the water to cool the data centers equipment doesn't actually come from the river. It comes from the aquifer, from the underground water, which is also Memphis drinking water. Like, the residents of Memphis drink that water. And the water comes from this aquifer that is like a giant sandbox. There's like sand, there's gravel, and you just extract the water out of it. The water is purified through the sandbox. And it looks a bit like this. So if you see, this is basically the water under, like, you have the rivers, but you also have water underground, and it's being extracted for the data center and for people to drink it. But as I said, you know, this area is full of, like, previous industries, previous industrial development. These XAI will withdraw 1 million gallons of water per day to cool the computers, which is a lot of water. It's really a lot of water. And these might create the conditions, it will actually create the conditions for chemicals to leach into the underground water storage. Why is that so? Because, again, you know, Memphis is not like an untouched natural landscape, but it's a city that has an industrial past. Along the Mississippi River around Memphis, we used to produce cotton, like the Americans used to produce cotton. There was a lot of river trade, you know, there was a power plant, there was a coal burner, so like all the coal ash that has been burned, it's stored there. Like, out of the coal burning, you still have the ash out of it, and then you have to, it's toxic, and you need to store it somewhere, and people put it in landfills. And they used to produce Ford machinery. There were, like, lots of activities there. So if you take out all this water for the data center, like, in a very condensed way, because the data center is just one and it takes out all this water from the aquifer, the problem is that this water, like, lacking from the ground, from the, like, sandbox in the ground, might leave space for the introduction of, like, arsenic and industrial waste that it's already buried in that area and can infiltrate the aquifer. So these will threaten the residents of Memphis. Also, it will be contaminated with coal ash. Basically, the municipality of Memphis is saying that they're not acting against pollution right now already, but it's going to happen within 10 to 15 years. So they're trying to prevent it, okay? On one side, yes, they want the data centers. It was going to bring work. It's going to bring more economic activity. But at the same time, they cannot take all the water and then leave it polluted for the residents that drink it. Ooh, sorry. And this is because, as I said, we don't live in pristine natural environments, but we live in the age of Anthropocene. Like, our epoch, the one in which we live, is supposed to be called Holocene. But since the last around 200 years, the scientists are not super agreeing on this, we turn it into the Anthropocene, which is an era in which the human activity has impacted so much the geological cycles that is more than the natural cycles itself. Like, when in the 3000 or 4000, the scientists will go and study the layers of the rock, the layers corresponding to our age will be impacted by our pollution, our plastic, our chemicals, all of that. So we don't start from ground zero. We start from resources that are already depleted, including water and rivers. This is a nice showcase of this. This is an ad by Back Market, the second-hand devices reseller, that is showing, like, the difference of pictures with the iPhone 4S and 14 Plus. Like, the only difference is that the ice is gone, you know, or like the water is gone. Like, the quality of the picture is not that different, but the water is gone. Or if you want to look at the statistics, basically, this is like the Earth overshoot day, which happened like 3 days ago for this year. It means like we're using the resources that the Earth is able to regenerate in 1 year in less than 1 year. So the rest of the year, we'll live on the resources from the future, and at some point they will run out because we're stealing from the future. And this is the same for the Mississippi River, right? Like you see the image here, like the difference between 2023 and 21 is that the river is drying up. And so the data centers are at risk if they are on a river that might dry up. The Mississippi River is not the only river that is drying up. There's a lot of other ones, we'll see later. One of the solutions from XAI is, okay, you know, for now, we burn methane with all these burners and we take the water from the underground, but in 2-3 years, we will be able to recycle the wastewater from the city and from other industrial plants. They will also recycle it for other industries, for the power plant and for a steel factory. And then I was reading about this. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. Well, they're recycling the water, recirculating the water. And then I read, the water coming from the Colossus water recycle plant would essentially be evaporated once it goes through the cooling system at XAI. I'm like, okay, they're recirculating other water from the waste, from the gray water system, but then they evaporate it. And I mean, yes, it's like when it evaporates, it's not gone, right? Like it's all part of like one global water system. There's also this problem that data centers are more and more built in dry areas because dry areas have like better environmental conditions to preserve the servers. And so you don't put servers in tropical lands where they might be damaged by the humidity, environmental humidity, but you put them in dry areas. You see UAE, Israel, Kuwait, Greece, Spain. Spain is like full of data centers from Amazon. And so like it's even more of a problem because you're competing with scarce water because dry areas have rivers that are drying up. And the data centers before AI used AC to cool down. It was enough. But with the power computing of AI, we cannot do just with AC. So we need AC and we need water. You know, we need both. So the high-density racks claim water. Water has been the resource that has determined the development of civilizations, together with stable CO2 and climate and blah, 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 but I'm not going to go into that because we're going to take 5 hours if I go there. But this is where we developed our cities. Like, we could develop cities and agriculture because of rivers, because of water. In fact, you know, like, we all studied probably, especially if you come from the West, the history of Babylon and the Tigris and the Euphrates, which named my presentation today, the Fertile Crescent. Like, we developed agriculture there. In this land that was bordered by 2 rivers that brought stability and water for irrigation. And even Babylon was one of the first cities in history that had terraced gardens, way before the vertical garden in Milan. So they had this, but we also used water for like trade, you know, like Venice was one of the cities that was able to become the richest in history at a certain time in history because they didn't depend, like they had enough water and aquifers behind the city and irrigation and food. They didn't have to think about it. They just could trade and do whatever they wanted. They were wealthy because they had access to water and food. Water was used, you know, for personal well-being. It was used for like striking political deals, like the Romans. Like every political decision was made at the thermal bath, and it's also used for health. I don't know if there's any Asian here, but like hot water for health, and it's also revered as something spiritual. We kind of lost these kind of things with technology a little bit, like especially in the West, again. So how do we use all this water beyond all these other like more poetic ways? 70% goes to agriculture. So now you think, oh, if 70% goes to agriculture, then it's not a problem of AI. We'll get there. So 70% goes to agriculture, irrigation, crops, water for livestock. A lot of water goes for livestock. Aquaculture nowadays. 20% goes to the industry. So for dilution, steam generation, washing, cooling of manufacturing equipment. It's used to cool like energy generation in fossil fuel and nuclear plants, and it's also affected like by wastewater from certain industrial processes. We don't count hydropower generation in this category, but we'll talk about it later. And then only 10% is used for people that drink it. So that 10%, for example, is the water that goes to the Memphis residents is only 10% of the overall water there. Right now, we also use it to create beautiful memes with AI. And we use it, again, for the data centers. This is what we are talking about. We use so much water, especially groundwater, that we tilted the Earth axis. The Earth axis of rotation was tilted because we extract so much water. Like we manage, the fresh water is not a lot, like it's less than, like 70% of the water is oceanic water. But still, we extract and move around so much of it that we tilted the rotation axis of our planet by about 4.3 centimeters per year, or a total of 80 centimeters along this study that went from 1993 to 2010. We extracted 2,150 gigatons of groundwater from inside the Earth, which means like that water that XAI is using for the data centers, like right next to the river from underground. And if we took all that water that we extracted from underground and we put it in the ocean, it would raise the ocean level by 6 millimeters, which doesn't seem a lot, but imagine like 70% of the Earth's surface is oceans. And also, well, the ice sheets melting, all of that, any mass change on Earth can tilt the axis rotation. This is why, like, another proof that we're living in the Anthropocene, where the humans have the biggest geological action on the planet. While the emissions of CO2 are widespread, like we throw CO2 in the environment and the atmosphere, and it goes around the world with the winds, but water is a localized, like fresh water especially, is a localized resource. It's concentrated in rivers and aquifers. This is the Nile River, by the way. I love that I had to put like a lot of river satellite views in this presentation. This is one example that I hold dear because I lived in Asia, but also because like it's a striking example of like how we misuse our rivers. So this is the Mekong River that starts in China from the Himalayan plateau on the eastern side, and it goes down through Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and then the estuary is in Vietnam. And like we use it for all different purposes, and then you have like this very strong geopolitical imbalance between a huge country like China and all these little countries of Southeast Asia that take the river after China, but also like they all trade along this river. When a river borders many countries, also at that stage, you don't know whose responsibility is it. Somehow the responsibility is in the middle, but then who checks, So what happens with the Mekong is, first, in the north, in the Chinese side, but also around Thailand and Myanmar, we have the dams. We put like lots of dams on the rivers because they create electricity, and we want electricity, especially it's a renewable type of electricity. And the dams already are stopping the flow of river, like less water goes south, and also less debris from the riverbed, the debris that will keep building the riverbed. They take these pieces of rock from the mountain, basically, and they bring it down to the estuary, and they keep the river healthy. So the dams already stop part of this. Then we have sand extraction for construction, because concrete can only be made with this type of sand. You cannot make concrete with desert sand. It's too fine. You need coarse sand from the rivers. So we have extraction, and this happens across all Southeast Asia. It's sold to the Chinese construction market, and again, you have some legal one, but when you you overcome the limits, then you have the legal one, and then whose responsibility is it when the river is shared between two countries? Like it's always tricky. Then we have the rice harvesting. This happens at the estuary in Vietnam. And the problem with all of this activity is that, again, like when you extract sand or when you put dams, you limit the flow of water, you take out the sand, the level of the river lowers the more it goes to the ocean because there's less debris and there's less water. So this rice production at the estuary is infiltrated by salt water. You have saltwater infiltration from the ocean, not because the ocean is raising so much, but because the river is losing its capacity and its debris at the bottom. So these rivers are affected by human activities and climate change at the same time. And you see how like construction and energy generation and data centers and food production, they're all interlinked, okay? The Amazon River, for the first time in history, is drying up seasonally. Then the water comes back, but this is like nothing normal. Or like this is the Nile River. Italy contributed to the creation of a dam in the Ethiopian, like the Nile River is composed of two rivers, one coming from Ethiopia, and that one, an Italian company helped Ethiopia build a huge dam, one of the biggest, and that's stopping lot of the flow of the water to the main Nile in Egypt, and it's affecting their agriculture. The Tigris and Euphrates that you see here again have the same issue with dams in Turkey. The water flow is stopping, and then you don't have enough water going to Iraq that is desertifying because of that. Iraq is where Babylonia used to be, so it was the Fertile Crescent, and now it's desertified. I found maps made with Python that I found them like many years ago. I resurfaced them recently. That show the river beds, the watersheds of these rivers. And it would be amazing to have countries based on rivers, because then nobody would fight for that. You know, you would have a river, you have to take care of the river, you have to put your data center wherever you need, but internally with your state, you compete with agriculture, construction, and data centers. But this is not the case. But anyway, these maps are beautiful, so I wanted to put them in the presentation. So rivers are localized again, and unfortunately we have borders, we have geopolitical issues with these rivers. The global water system is connected and affected by multiple human activities overall, like beyond the rivers. I don't want to go too much in detail in here, but you remember this image of like, you know, the water evaporates, goes to the mountain, stays in the glacier, goes down to the ocean, and blah, 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 filtrates underground, and it fills the aquifer underground, etc. Remember the amounts of water between agriculture, industry, and domestic. We're like changing this balance with global warming, because when the environment heats, you know, you have less water in the stored as ice and more around the atmosphere, and that creates a few problems. With loss of ice, basically, you don't have water that is stored on the mountains to preserve for the summer. So when you don't have a glacier, it's not just the fact that you cannot go skiing anymore, but also in summer you might experience drought because you have less water stored in the mountains. For every degree Celsius of warming, you have 7% more capacity of the atmosphere to hold water, which means giant storms, supercharged storms, atmospheric rivers becoming more violent, hurricanes becoming more violent, and also fueling more droughts and floods. And also, this is changing, the melting ice caps and all of these is changing the oceanic currents. And if the oceanic currents, hot and cold, they change, they're also linked to the atmospheric currents. So these ones change too. And basically, we have very contained like layers of air that separate like the polar area, the subtropical area, the equatorial area. But now, if you see, can you see my mouse? Yeah. Okay, if you see that one, used to be stable, the polar vortex is becoming unstable. This is why sometimes we have like winter storms in April, and then it becomes super hot and then warm again. It's because of this instability, like climate change. The problem is the instability that it generates in agriculture, in water provision, in weather conditions, etc. This has nothing to do with that, but I love this map of the Mediterranean with the currents, so I just put it there. So, what's the current situation? The current situation is that we have more heat, more water moving around, and more uncertainty in general. And then the aquifers and the rivers are less predictable. You see where I'm going. So what is the impact on AI? First, the rapid expansion of AI and the LLMs and generative AI, it's fueling the construction of data centers that are more highly water intensive and have more cooling needs because they process more information in less amount of time. And then it will, the research say the demand of water for AI will be, by 2027, will be half of the annual consumption of water of the United Kingdom. And that each response, each session of 20 to 100 responses, depending on the complexity, amounts to 1 liter of water. I don't think it's that much yet. It will become a lot, but it's not that much yet. So I checked what's the amount of water that the United Kingdom uses. They're very good with their water. Like you see, it's yellow. Italy is red. So like they're not using a lot of water, but still, you know, like it's like adding another country to already like an environment that is already pressured by scarcity of water. Actually, the World Economic Forum, not Greenpeace, but the World Economic Forum, is saying that the global freshwater demand will exceed supply by 40% before 2030. And we have like this John Rockstrom from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. He says, we have a triple crisis because we are misusing water, polluting water, and changing the global hydrological cycle in the ways I showed you before. The only alternative to data centers using water from aquifers and river is this test that Microsoft has done a couple of years ago to put data centers in the oceanic waters. It works, it's more expensive because the oceanic water, salt water, is way more corrosive. As much as like putting data centers in a tropical forest that is very wet, it's again corrosive because of the humidity in the air. AI can also help water, right? Because there's always the other side of the coin. And AI can optimize management of various industrial processes, and it can reduce water usage by up to 25%. And it can cut operational costs by as much as 15%. It can enable real-time monitoring and predictive analysis and proactive leak detection, which I think it's very useful, especially in places like Italy. We know that the water network, like the water distribution network, is very leaky. You can predict these issues with AI instead of sending like a camera or like sensors inside the pipes. AI is also improving water and energy efficiency in sectors such as wastewater treatment, manufacturing, food processing, and further reducing the water intensity of industrial operations. So again, this is a good side of AI for what concerns water. When you look for images about like how can AI help water systems, you find all these like beautiful images of like these robots analyzing tomatoes and this AI, interacting with the fields and these first images from FAO, like everybody's like everybody really wants to believe in it. I worked with one startup in 2013, I think, that put the first sensors in fields to understand, the level of water, nitrogen, and phosphorus in the fields. It's still a very manual process. It's still a process that, yes, it's also digitalized now, but again, when they started, they worked only with wine producers and olive oil producers because they were the only ones having the margins to afford that. So we're gonna get there, but probably not yet. Remember that 70% of all the water is used in agriculture, so there is a huge need for that. But also, imagine like these greenhouses in south of Spain that give us 50% of our vegetables in winter. This is not like, this is real data. Like these greenhouses in Almeria in the south of Spain, they provide most of the fruits and vegetables that we eat in winter. And they're also powered by migrant labor that comes from illegal routes from North Africa and illegal routes. But like imagine using AI for this kind of production. Like we have a very ideal way of thinking about, like, oh yeah, tomato production in this beautiful natural setting. The reality sometimes is very different. Like how can you predict the water stability of a greenhouse? I don't know, from space. So the best case scenario is that we use more water to deal with uncertainty and reduce its own impact. So AI will like slowly reduce its own impact, break less things, move a little less fast, and also reduce the impact of other industries, especially agriculture, but also industrial activities. The worst case scenario is this one, like that we keep burning a lot of methane, we keep using a lot of water to generate memes, and we will keep ignoring the impacts of water of like the digital sector and the AI sector. So I understand that when we work from our offices, thinking about the water that AI using is not the first thing that comes to our minds. Also, like we don't even bring the reusable water bottle. So imagine thinking about the impacts of like the code that I'm writing. It's not that easy. So this is why, I think like coming to the solutions part. First thing, I think it's useful to have a systemic perception, to use systemic thinking. As a designer, I was trained to think about the final user. What does the final user want? But now we want to switch from human to planetary scale. So what does that mean? It means that instead of developing a service for my user, like I work for a business to develop a service for the user, I try to zoom out and see like what resources is this business using and what externalities is it producing. So is it using too much water? Is it polluting the water? And then trying to see the impact on the context, which is, for example, the city of Memphis and the residents, and on the ecosystem. So every other natural resource that is not human, like every other type of life on Earth, or like water, air, land. So we need to think about all the other, living beings that share the same resources with us and also might contribute to their depletion or like conflict for that. Which means, for example, this is the example that I always give to my students in design school, that even if you think that a data center is something that has no impact because it's like the cloud, the cloud is like something in our brains and our minds that it's not really, we don't think about the cables and the electric connectivity. So the cloud uses water from the river that might impact frogs breeding in this same river, and the frogs move away because the water is too hot for them to breed, and then if the frogs move away, the mosquitoes will come, and disease will come, and it will attack human beings, and it goes on and on. This is very dystopian, but you understand the point. Like every activity can be analyzed through its impact on the rest that doesn't have a voice, like the frogs. The other thing is something that the European Union is mandating for big companies. It's called this double materiality assessment, which took me a while to understand when I started trying to see environmental declarations that are becoming necessary in the EU. But double materiality is actually very clever because it analyzes the company and the planet and society, and how they affect one another. So not just how polluting is your company and how does it affect the environment, but also how does the current Earth condition affect your company. So if you depend so much on this river of water, what happens when it runs dry? Like what happens to your data centers? What happens to the data of the European citizens, the privacy? Like if you have to switch from that data center to one in Saudi Arabia, I don't know, what happens, okay? And so with this double materiality assessment, this is another tool that is available to all of us to try to balance, what are the company's emissions, water consumptions, use of resources, with what are the risks that come from the planetary conditions, the climate risks. The European Union, we know we haven't been very competitive, with developing AI and digital technologies, to the point that Draghi, was called up to say, like, okay, what do we have to do? And his response was like, just do something. And so they came up with this Clean Industrial Act. And one of the cores of the Clean Industrial Act is building AI, data centers, cloud computing, all of these. And my point is, okay, like, very good. Now we're moving towards AI. We're moving towards this AI continent action plan. But how are we doing that? Are there like we have the European Green Deal that sets a limitation for sustainability. We have this push towards AI and data centers. How do they talk to each other? Like we didn't think about it. So one answer comes from Singapore, for example. Of course, Singapore. They predict everything. They study everything. They are amazing, especially for a designer, because they use designers like the UK to study how things will unfold in the future and to design things before they happen. So what they have done is they realized with COVID and even before that they cannot depend on other countries for resources, because the moment Malaysia tells them, we don't give you water or food, they're screwed. So they are the first ones that have deployed, for example, like artificial, like lab-grown chicken in their canteens. And also, they are developing ways to recirculate water internally within the country of Singapore. And they have developed this system that is fully circular, so like 100% circular economy, that's what they say, I don't know. They use rainwater, they store the rainwater, they collect it, they store it, they put it into the reservoirs. They also have desalination plants, and they also have gray water and wastewater treatments to turn it back into drinkable water. I don't know if you understand like what is the extent of this work. Like turning wastewater and gray water into drinking water, it's something that some countries don't even dare approaching, because first, the backlash from people, they were not like, people always say, I will not drink my toilet's water, And the second thing is like, even desalination, it has a huge impact. It needs to be very well managed. You need to have very on-point technology to develop that. they also make it look like Apple headquarters, you know? It looks like this. Their desalination and water filtration center is perfect. So let's learn from Singapore, maybe. We want to push towards AI. We're closing? Okay. Okay. And the last thing is, sorry. I had a timer. Okay. Okay. The last thing is adaptation and mitigation. These two words are like the two approaches that we have to use contemporarily when we relate to climate change. Adaptation is to adapt, you know, to the different future that will come with climate change that is already happening. And mitigation is trying to reduce, you know, the trajectory of like global warming. For example, adaptation in water, it means preventing data center from running dry. And mitigation is circulating water without wasting it. In general, water and energy saving is both adaptation and mitigation. So we need both of these. So for example, we need industrial symbiosis. This is already like a system in Denmark, to recirculate water from like one data center to a factory, and like instead of dispersing it and evaporating it, we can recirculate it. There's somebody in the UK is like heating pools, like public pools with data centers. This is how this industrial symbiosis looks in Denmark, by the way. Or we can have like these kind of parks, like this one in Bangkok, that store rainwater and they can be used, for example, to cool the data centers, like atmospheric water that is coming more than before. I have 3 calls to action for like 3 or 4 calls to action. First is think systemically when designing with AI and backcast from climate goals. So set your climate goal and backcast from there because it's going to help keep your company safe. Using planetary embodiment, like studying the impacts on other like species on the planet. In the long run, it will save you money. Second is being frugal when you design, when you develop. You know, we have the lesson from DeepSeek. Build efficient AI from the start. Then build with water and store water, like be that glacier that you would need in summer, but you will not have in 10 years' time. And it will make it or break it in the next decade by 2040. And the last part is like working with local communities, not against them, because climate change already affects everyone, and these communities are also your workers. That's it. Thank you.